As you're probably aware, our page designer recently underwent a massive overhaul, and with that has come a variety of changes and changes in the way that we do things. And this video is a video that I'm creating to help you understand the changes regarding containers specifically. So in the past, the way we have done things is designing pages using blocks, rows, and columns, but now you can achieve those same designs using containers. And there are a bunch of specific settings for containers, and there are a ton of different things that you can do using containers. So I want to bring your attention to those different settings in this video and just help you get started with using the new changes. So I'm just going to navigate over to my website by clicking on View Your Website on the top left hand side, and you'll see that I've added a template here for us to go through. And like I said, the way we've designed pages in the past has been using things like well, that's not what I want. Click on the column. There we go. We're using rows, columns, and then our content, of course. But we can now achieve this same design using containers only. We don't need to use rows and columns. You can simply use containers. That doesn't mean that you can't do it this way. You can, of course, still do it this way, but you can also do it using containers. And it's actually incredibly easy. So I am going to scroll down a little bit to this design over here, and I'm going to show you how we can replicate this design using containers only. So the first thing I'm going to do is simply add a container. So I'm going to right click and add a new container. And you'll see that this container now takes up the entire space of the block. So I want to change the size of that so that it matches this content. And I'm going to come here to the width and make it the same size. So the next thing I want to do is actually go ahead and clone the content within one of these containers. These are already in containers. I could go ahead and clone the entire container and do it that way, but I'm going to take it a little bit slower and show you how we can get pretty much the exact design using containers. So I'm just going to go ahead and clone each item and drag it into that container. And I want to clone it again, drag it into the container again. Same thing. It's just, there we go. That's not in the container at all. There we go. And then clone that button. There we go. And drag that button into the container. So I've moved all of this into a container, but I actually need to put a container within the container. So I'm just going to quickly right click on that icon over there, and I'm going to select wrap. Now that is going to then move that content into its own individual container. So I'm then going to just quickly drag all of this into that container as well. So now I want to create this icon layout that I've got here with the three sets next to each other. So what I'm going to do, well, first I want to align this content. So I'm going to click on the container, make sure I've got the right one, and I want to align that content so that it is all centered. I'm then going to clone this container two times, not three times. So I'm just going to clone it once and clone it twice. So now you'll see I've got those three containers within my parent container. So now that I've got these settings for my parent container open, all I'm going to do is come here to my direction. And at the moment it's set to vertical, but I want to make it horizontal. So now that content is all sitting nicely together side by side. And you'll see that that's pretty much already created that same design. But if I want to change the spacing at all I have to do is change the gap settings. So if you're familiar with using rows, then you'll know what the gap setting is all about. That's going to create an even spacing between my containers. And you'll see that I've now actually gotten incredibly close to that original design. And then to complete that design, all I have to do is clone that parent container, and you'll see I've got that same design laying out here. So that is one of the ways in which containers can make making these more advanced designs a lot easier for you. But as you can tell, there are a few more settings regarding containers. So one of the things I do want to draw your attention to is buttons. You might panic a little bit about buttons if you're used to the way they used to work, But now we've changed it because of the way that we use containers. So buttons used to be a multi-item template so that you could have buttons appearing next to each other. But now we have buttons within containers. So you can add your button, and then to put buttons next to each other in a layout, you're going to want to wrap those buttons in a container. So this button over here is already in a container. So I can come into this container and I can simply add another button. So I could add a button, but let's be aesthetic. Let's keep it the same. So I'm going to clone that button, and you'll see that that button is appearing next to the other button, but only because it's in a container. If I add buttons outside of this container, so I'm going to right click, add a button, and I want to right click and add another button, those buttons are going to appear under each other. And there isn't a way for me to put them next to each other because they are not contained within a container. But again, if I wanted to move them into a container, I would right click, wrap, and then I can move those buttons. Oh, there we go. I would like you to be in the container. There we go. Now they're in the container. I can come to the container settings, make it horizontal, and those buttons will appear next to each other. And then again, I can space those buttons by coming here to the gap setting and creating the space that I want between those buttons. And I can also change the alignment of these buttons and the content within my containers by simply changing the alignment. Because it's in horizontal mode now, that's not going to align the way I want it to. So if I come here to vertical, my buttons are on top of each other. Now my buttons are aligned to the left-hand side. Now they're aligned to the center. And now they are aligned to the right-hand side. And I can have these centered, but if I change it to horizontal, you'll see that they are then justified to the left-hand side. But if I want them to appear in the center, I can do that. I can change it to the center, I can change it to the end, I can choose to space it around the container, and I can choose to add a space between, or I can space the content evenly. So those are a few ways that you can justify the content horizontally within your container, but you can also, if it is spaced vertically, those are going to do the same thing by spacing it around. I haven't changed the space of that container, so that's not going to work very well right now, but you'll see if I make the container a little bit bigger, the height, I'm wanting to change the height. So let's make the height 800 so that you can see what I mean with this spacing. So currently it's spaced to the start, then I can space it to the center, and then I can space it around, and I can add even spacing. So the justify and align settings are going to change this way. I can't remember the word for this right now, but you understand what I mean. Depending on whether or not you've set your direction to be vertical or horizontal. So let's put those as horizontal, and let's just change this back to filling the parent. Oh, no, I want to hug it. I want to hug the content. So I'm going to get to that in just a second. So the sizing is very different. I'm going to use the image, I think, to explain this a little bit better. So one other thing, I'm going to come to my image quickly, and I'm going to scroll through the image settings, and you might notice that there's no way for you to add a background to the image module itself. So you can't add a background to any of the content modules. What you can do is add a background to your container instead. So if I come here to my image and I navigate up, it's in a container. And so I'm going to add a background to this container. So let me add a background, and there you go. So now that container has a background, the image does not have a background. So that's just another little thing to be aware of considering containers. But now I want to talk about the container size. So we have our container size, which is over here. We have our width and our height. And you'll notice that we have three different settings. We have fixed, which is where you decide how big that container is. So I can make it 800 pixels, or I can make it 10 pixels, or I can choose to fill the parent. So that is going to fill to the size of whatever my container is contained within. So in this case, my container is contained within a column, so it's going to try and fill that size. But I believe there is some padding on this container. Nope. There is probably padding in the column. There we go. Yes, okay. So if I take all this spacing away, then you'll see that this container is now filled to the size of the parent. So again, I'm just going to select my container, and then I can also change that from filling the parent to hugging the content. So let me make this a little clearer again. So I'm going to set that as filling the parent. I'm going to come to my image and I'm going to change the size to be 100 by 100. That's a little bit small. Let's make it 300 by 300. Okay, so now you can see that the container is still filling the parent in terms of its width, because that is what it is set to, but it is hugging the content regarding the height. So if I change the width to then hug the content, you'll see that that container is now hugging the content as tightly as it can. And now I might not want the image as well to be aligned to the left-hand side. I would then come here and change that. In this case, sorry, I would change it within the column because the column is parenting the container. I'm busy moving around the content that's being hugged, so obviously nothing is going to change. So coming back to my container, that is just another way that you can change the size and alignment within your content, within your container, excuse me. So we can come here and I can say, well, I would like for the width to hug my content, but I want the height to fill the parent. So now I've got a stripe containing my content within this container, and I can achieve a similar result doing the opposite. So it'll fill my parent widthways and the height will hug the container. So that's just, we'll hug the content. So those are a few of the different settings that you can play around with using containers. And again, you could simply go and design your entire website using containers alone. You don't need to use rows and columns anymore. You can simply use containers. But again, we're not saying that you can't use rows and columns. You can do that as well. If you find using containers easier, then please do. We've simplified it as much as possible, put a lot of our settings into the container to allow you to have more control over where your content appears on your page. So those are a few of the settings that I would like you to be aware of so that you have something to go off of and you don't feel too lost using any old training videos. If you want to know what is going on with buttons not working the way they used to, or backgrounds and advanced settings not working the way they used to, hopefully this video has helped you clarify that a little bit, and hopefully you can start designing incredible things using containers.